Welcome to Cybersecurity Where You Are, the Center for Internet Security's podcast. I'm Sean Atkinson, CISO at CIS.
And I'm Tony Sager, Senior Vice President and Chief Evangelist at CIS. Cybersecurity affects us all, whether we're online at home, managing a company, supporting clients, or running a state or local government.
So join us on Wednesdays as we discuss trends and threats, explore security best practices, and interview experts in the industry.
Together, we'll clarify these issues, creating confidence in the connected world.
Hello, and welcome to the show Cybersecurity Where You Are. I'm Sean Atkinson, CISO here at the Center for Internet Security, joined by the host with the most, the Hall of Famer, the difference maker, Mr. Tony Sager. Tony, how are you, sir?
Great, Sean. Great to be back.
Fantastic. We have two very special guests, CIS's own Mishal and David. Mishal, could you do a quick introduction to our audience?
Absolutely. So Mishal Makshood, I've been working with CIS for approximately 5.5 years now. Have worn many hats, but my current role is on the cloud security team, where I partner and work closely with strategic planning with Microsoft Azure. So I'm the Partner Alliance Manager for Azure today.
Wonderful. Fantastic. And David, please.
Sure. My name is David Kalish. I am a senior cybersecurity solutions engineer. I do a lot of pre-sales work. I work with our customers when they are evaluating our tools and our products. I've been at CIS for almost 3 years now, and I've been in tech for over 30.
Wow, fantastic. So, Mishal, we're going to focus on hardened images. So for those new to that concept of what a hardened image is, what is a CIS hardened image, and why are they becoming such a foundational part of secure cloud infrastructure?
Yeah, those are two very specific and good questions. So the hardened images, the way I like to call them, are those pre-configured virtual machine templates that have been meticulously engineered according to CIS's globally recognized benchmarks, right? So in plain terms, they're secure blueprints for operating systems where every unnecessary port, service, and permission has already been tuned to minimize exposure. They're become foundational because in today's cloud ecosystem, security can no longer be retrofitted. They must be embedded from inception. So the hardened images offer a trustworthy baseline, giving organizations that reducible and verifiable way to deploy infrastructure that already aligns with CIS's best practices. So in retrospect, it's not just about security, it's about predictability, in uniformity, and the resilience at scale.
Wonderful. David, anything else to add there about hardened images?
So hardened images from a CIS standpoint are fundamental, right? These are things that a lot of organizations are taking advantage of, and they're using them to secure their entire organization from top to bottom. It's the easy button to make sure that you can do everything and have security by design.
Absolutely. So one of the elements there when we talk about foundational elements of secure cloud infrastructure is also protection of critical national infrastructure as well. So what makes these images uniquely suited to that mission, David?
Yeah, so exactly. Critical national infrastructure, we're talking energy grids, transportation, healthcare systems. These are the important arteries of modern civilization. And we all know that a single misconfiguration in those environments can have problems and cascade into disruption across society. CIS hardened images help prevent and inoculate those systems against risk. They embody the principle of like a security by design, ensuring that even at the most granular system level, configurations are intentional and compliant. And for operators tasked with safeguarding national resilience, that assurance is indispensable. It fosters public trust and operational continuity, both of which are essential to national security.
Now, Tony, go ahead, Tony, please.
All right. I like the focus here on national. And we've been over the decades moving from a kind of a do-it-yourselfer model of security to one that is more built into the infrastructure. And when you think of it, right, and one of the challenges I think hardened images help us manage is no enterprise is on its own. That is, there's a national infrastructure here, right? There's sectors, there's business partnerships, supply chains. And that question of resilience and and assurance or confidence is something that has to be renegotiated over and over again. Is this enterprise safe to bring into my supply chain? Right? Will it make me any less secure? And it seems like, if you don't have an approach like Hardened Images, right, a sort of a standard way to talk about what is your security expectation, then you can never get to that picture that you guys are talking about, right? Which is this, again, it's not about one enterprise, it's about how all enterprises interact. And so how many of the folks that you deal with, Michelle, let me ask you first, how many people sort of see that problem, right? Understand how important that is to not only, it's not about protecting just my desktops, but also my partnerships, my supply chains, and the rest of the folks I have to deal with.
Absolutely, Tony. So we deal with local clients here in the United States and also globally. And I think that culture is shifting, especially globally. US tends to be kind of the big, how do I say this in words? The front runner in terms of cybersecurity. And I feel like other countries are catching up, but I've heard you say this before, cybersecurity is a team sport. So we want them to catch up, right? Because we're all in this together. And what I've seen is now, instead of focusing on security as kind of like bolted on, it's starting from the baseline. Hey, how do we build this and start secure? I think that's the biggest change in culture I've seen in security over the last 5 years.
No, that's exactly right. I don't know if it's, back to the origins of this. Do you guys, have you ever heard the comic book origin story of Hardened Images? You could say no. Let me tell you.
Well, you are going to hear it now.
You're going to hear it now, whether you like it or not. See, this is why Sean doesn't let me talk during these things. Well, so does the name Rick Camo or Blake Franz ring a bell?
Rick Camo does. I've actually worked with him.
Yeah, so the company was founded on the benchmarks. And it was a different model back in 2000. We were just celebrating our 25th birthday, so I've been doing a little digging here. And the idea was you in fact are going to do it yourself. We can publish guidance. People will download guidance. They will read guidance. They will poke it into their systems, configure it individually, right? And that was kind of the expectation. Hardened Images just scales this, just takes a lot of the error out of it, gives you scale, gives you dependable configurations with known properties. This is amazing. You'd like to think, well, this is the output of some incredible strategic offsite where people thought about this and really dreamed this up and said this is the future of CIS. But it turned out it was Blake and Rick, as I know the story, which is as they were building benchmarks, they had to test them. So they take a laptop and they configure it up to something else, and they configure it up to something else, and they configure it up to something else. And then they realize, wait a minute, we can go to AWS and get virtual images. And we can set these up and have them pre-configured. This will make our testing so much better. And at some point, they look at each other and go, wait a minute, if it's easier for us, it would be easier for everybody else too. And that's it. It went from just an idea in the lab testing, how do we test our own products before we put them out there, to this idea, wait a minute, this eliminates a lot of mistakes, a lot of room for error. And this is valuable, right? This creates value. And so it was nothing more complicated than that. Some of the best things we've done are serendipity rather than strategy. But it's grown in this way that you guys described, right? This really think of it as an enterprise tool that has properties that you can trust, that's based upon the work of expertise of people you can't afford. I think that's one of the great benefits that I talk about this. You can't afford that talent, and yet they're willing to give you their output in this digestible form.
So Tony, I have heard that origin story a little bit in the past, and I think it's very valuable because of a lot of our customers don't understand that, and they're still building their systems and building their machines, either whether they're on premise or in the cloud, the old way, right? You take that machine, you get all the settings, how they came, and then you're making slow, incremental, positive changes. But boy, is there a better way, right? The CIS Hardened Images allow you to do it immediately, and then you're secure by design.
No, and that the term that I used earlier, David, and you're right on the money, is this: it has known security properties. Right. In other words, I'm not counting on, I grew up in a world like in the Defense Department. You were counting on your youngest, least paid, least trained people to try and, take complicated technology out of the box and fight wars with it. Run networks in the sand in the middle of deserts, right? With bad connections, and have the skill to pull all this together mentally and create this content. And it's just unrealistic. It makes no sense. When in fact, even if you were, even if you have special circumstances, I think anyone who doesn't start from a CIS hardened image is crazy. I mean, it is, you get so much value, with that as a starting point, right? Again, the output of expertise. But maybe we can go down another route here, since I've already interrupted Sean. But what about the issue of how do I tailor it for my environment, right? We don't claim that there's one size that fits all. What we can say is that one starting point, the hardened images, gives you tremendous value, tremendous analysis, tremendous security properties. But now it goes into a real life. So you must have, you deal with real life situations every day, right? Well, people take it and say, love what you did, but I've got this legacy application, or I've got this unique problem. And any advice for the audience on that topic?
I would love to take that question. So, Tony, over the last few years, one thing I've noticed is organizations as a whole have become extremely complex. So we're not just working with a manufacturer. I'm just giving manufacturing, for example, in the US. They may have a CISO here, and they may have a regional CISO in Europe or in the Middle East, right? And they all have varying opinions on how things should be done and how they can operate in a cloud environment. The one thing I love about Hardened Images is it takes away that guesswork, right? These are global subject matter experts, CIS engineers, and our collaborators and our partners over at AWS, Azure, and GCP that put all their knowledge and their resources into helping build this. And with that being said, what's the most important thing is, I think when they start at a foundation of like CIS, it takes the guesswork out. It takes the human error element out. And at the same time, it also helps level set an organization. So if a CISO doesn't agree here or there, there's still that baseline that they can follow. And their teams, like you said, the ones that are probably the most underskilled or undertrained, can focus on other things and utilize the CIS hardened image.
Completely agree. Well, when we come back, we're going to take a quick break, but I want to talk about compliance. I want to talk about partnership, and I want to talk about how this fits into modern security strategies from an architecture perspective. So we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. Tony, cloud security is like setting up a new home security system.
You have responsibilities like setting up alarms and locking certain doors.
But unlike a home security system, cloud security doesn't come with a manual.
No, you don't have a definitive guide to what you need to harden in your cloud environments or how.
There's got to be a better way.
Thankfully, there is. CIS Hardened Images. These virtual machine images come pre-hardened to the CIS benchmarks, providing built-in cloud security and compliance without any guesswork.
CIS Hardened Images are also available for just cents per compute hour, saving you time and money managing your cloud security posture.
And all while using major cloud service platforms like AWS, Azure, GCP, and OCI.
Cost-effective cloud configurations, CIS Hardened Images are ready to go when you are.
Spin one up today by visiting cisecurity.org.
So, David, we're thinking now, and we've seen the life cycle, we've seen the generation, and the meaning of the hardened image. But it also has to, in a lot of ways, contribute to compliance in certain areas. So how have you seen that over time, where frameworks, NIST, ISO, FedRAMP, etc., how is the hardened image fitting into that particular element?
Yeah, so there are a few different tools from CIS that can assist with that, right? CIS not only creates the benchmarks, which are those recommendations for system hardening, but the CIS Critical Security Controls, right? The Critical Security Controls provide that easy on-ramp to organizations to allow them to map to other international standards and frameworks. And I talk with customers all the time that are interested in this, right? They want to use the CIS Critical Security Controls and use that basically as their Rosetta Stone. And then from there, map to other frameworks that are more specific to their organization or whatever they're being audited with. So the CIS hardened images offer a shortcut to that type of alignment. Each image has the capability of being mapped to other frameworks, either directly or through the CIS Critical Security Controls. It doesn't eliminate the need for governance, but it reduces friction. It means your teams can spend less time reconciling those Excel spreadsheets that everyone uses, right? And more time strengthening their security posture.
Oh, 100%. So, Tony, we've got an ecosystem, it seems, that I'm going to say you've created, because I'm going to squarely put the origin story of the controls with you and some very other smart people as well. But you see how this all comes together. It's amazing. Like you say, there's these serendipitous elements that just come together, and now we're building ecosystems that, not only from a governance perspective, risk management, hardened configuration, all coming together to really secure infrastructure and enterprises. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things we're really proud of at CIS. You know, that David, you mentioned the people use our work, right? By design, the controls are closer to implementation, right? They're not giant catalogs. You know, they're not abstract narratives where we have to parse out, do they want me to do 2 things or 5 things in here? You know, we our position in the ecosystem is about being prescriptive, helping people. You know, we operate from a fundamentally different philosophy. You know, I grew up in a different world of computer security where everyone's a special snowflake. You know, oh my gosh, your risk appetite of your managers isn't, you know, is so unique, and your dependencies are so special. You couldn't possibly do what the folks down the hall do. You know, or in the next enterprise. And I've always thought that was nonsense. You know, we're all connected on the same network. We're using essentially the same technology, and we're interconnected in business relationships that we don't understand until something goes wrong. And so that has always told me there's a set of things we all need to do, you know, very similar to public health, safety. And, you know, we all need to do a set of things so that there's a baseline of confidence that we can. Now, some areas need more safety procedures, right? More specialized equipment, and that's okay. But you need a place to start. And we've also been very conscious of we're part of a larger ecosystem of these other frameworks. You know, poor Sean lives in this world of, you know, we don't get to deal with just one framework, right? We get to deal with most of them at any given moment. And, you know, as a matter of, again, national strategy, you want to reuse as much work as possible. You want to say, you know, I need to understand things like threats, business dependencies, what's critical to my business, but I don't want to build 5 parallel paths to deal with ISO and national and the NIST cybersecurity framework and ISO 27000. So we sit in this more technical level, and again, really proud of the work that we've done. We're not publishing, you know, the final word on stone tablets. We're creating content and all the complementary content to help people achieve the good intentions. Right? What are we trying to help them do? Let's make sure that we give them the tools to do that. But that mapping is a really important one, because everyone, we haven't done this in years, but we did a survey once. To how many security frameworks do you have to deal with? The answer is almost never 1. It's almost always 3, 4, 5, 7, 10, depending on your industry, which means you can't afford to do 10 parallel work streams, right? You want, and so we see that, we recognize that, and we do something about it at CIS. As near as I can tell, maybe you know better, Dave. We're the only folks I know that see this, produce all that cross mapping. And I said, and when the other end will cooperate, and they don't all cooperate, believe me. Like the Cloud Security Alliance, we work very closely with them so that we agree on how to map from our products to theirs and back again. And that's that way you don't have to pay someone to do it. You don't have to do it yourself. But this ecosystem thing is something that you've addressed also, right? We want to help people get into that. We want to help them grow within that system, and achieve the good intentions, right? And which means we provide measurement tools, ways to compare, on ramps to get started, and all that kind of stuff. And the hardened images are just such an amazing. I forget, was it Mishal that used the word? It gets you so far along, to where you need to be anyway, right? You could figure it out yourself, but my goodness, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you save your people and their brain power for, again, things that are unique or different, not the things that are going to be the same?
To add on to that, I do a lot of webinars and presentations on behalf of CIS. And one of the things that we can do now is we can ask all of the different members that are attending to react to us when we're doing the presentations with those little emojis and reactions. And it's been very helpful. So literally, just a few weeks ago, I did a presentation and we were asking customers how many frameworks do they have to map to, and my cutoff was 4 or more, or 4 or less, 3 or less. And it was about half and half, which means that most of the people on the call had to do with at least 4 different standards. And that's a big deal, right? Having the CIS Critical Security Controls and the mappings that we already provide to them is invaluable.
No, completely agree. But I think it's one of the other things when I'm thinking ecosystem, Mishal, as well as partnerships in the space. You'd mentioned, some of those, but we have to collaborate in the space in order to, one, build and achieve scale, but also, creating trust with the ecosystem in order to deploy and manage respectfully our capabilities to make everybody stronger. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, absolutely. So our collaborations with hyperscalers are what gives CIS Images their reach and reliability, right? So by integrating directly into cloud marketplaces, management consoles, and automation pipelines, we make security accessible at a click of a button, which is extremely important in our global reach and the global market. Partnerships like these extend CIS's collective defense, the idea that security is not just a solitary pursuit, but more of an ecosystem endeavor. And through co-engineering with AWS, and I'm going to highlight Azure because that's what I represent more, but that as well as GCP, we achieve security at a planetary scale. So a level of standardization and no single organization could achieve that being alone.
I love that story, Mishal, because I was around for the late 1990s. I know I'm a dinosaur here. The origin of things like DIS-STIGs, if the audience remembers that. And NIST called them checklists. At NSA, we called them NSA security guides. These were some of the points of inspiration around the time of the origin of CIS benchmarks. And people forget, that was the perspective of the government, right? And the notion was this: we cannot trust those vendors. They're shipping their products wide open. We have to, work around them, right? We have to create this understanding of how to secure the system because the vendor is irresponsible, and therefore we're doing it despite them. And moving to a model of cooperation, right? And again, those were different times. People forget things like CVE started for that reason. Those vendors won't admit they have flaws in their software. Therefore, we have to come up with a way to identify them, name them, and point tools at them. But, we at CIS shifted really early, right? This is not about combat. This is about the ecosystem. This is about cooperation. So you both have given great examples of direct cooperation with both service providers, but also the IT vendors who are responsible for this. We've matured as an industry from, oh my gosh, the government's over here and the industry's over there, to something really different, right? David, any other examples along those lines?
Yeah, I have a fun story about that. When Mishal and I were at AWS reInvent a while ago, AWS, right? Of course, what we're doing is we're at the CIS booth and we're trying to get people to come over, and we're trying all of the different things, check out our socks, all that kind of stuff. And we started saying, hey, check out the STIG level images, hardened images. And that was a big deal. A lot of people, especially with the high and tight hair, that all turn around. Everybody was very interested. It's a big deal.
It is. And it's really a sea change in the way we think of it. It was also, again, and, again, we tended to think of, well, the DOD, the Defense Department, has a problem. But that's a different problem than the rest of us or the rest of government. Well, no, it's not. It turns out we're all in the same problem, right? We're all, as I used to say when I was in government, the Defense Department made a choice long ago. Nobody goes to war without commercial suppliers. Nobody gets paid in the military without, commercial financial companies. We're all in this together, right? This complexity of the business relationship means a certain level of behavior. And I think that is reflected in the kind of work that you guys have done here. I know one of our board members one time said something, with CIS, we're really proud. We're agnostic to the market or the vendors or something. I said, I wouldn't say that. It's not that we don't know or don't care. No, we're independent of right? Our independence is one of our most valued properties. We're independent but cooperative with the marketplace. They're not our enemies. They're our technology suppliers, right? They are the infrastructure that we all live and conduct business on and live on. And it's to everyone's benefit to see that as a collaborative activity, not one where, we're fighting, we don't trust them, they don't trust us. That doesn't take you very far. And so these examples, right, working with the service providers, with the IT vendors, with the policymakers, allows us then to create this, this big interacting set of things that are mutually reinforcing, as opposed to, oh my gosh, I got 10 different frameworks I got to deal with, and everyone speaks a different language and has a different concern.
Completely agree. I mean, when we think of it, Tony, it's as we start to assess that type of activity, I mean, it's really understanding the environment, right? It's not that we don't care and that we're agnostic or anything like that. We understand that environment. We're working with where they are, but also where the customer, our members are as well. And trying to pollinate those two elements to create something that's both tangible and foundational to an underlying security program. It's incredible. I mean, it really has shown, and I think with the control versions over time, Tony, that has also adapted to the environment as well to introduce concepts of maturation with the implementation groups. There's a huge shift in terms of thinking about these things. And that's really where, obviously the team, Phyllis, Charity and the team are coming up and thinking about how do we approach that environment? How do we approach those that are having to deal with not now, and Mishal and David, I'll respect this, is multi-cloud, right? We're starting to see that the multi-cloud element is becoming part of respective modern infrastructure, as well as modern security strategies, Tony. When we've, I'm not sure how many times we've said zero trust on the podcast, but I expect it's a few. and DevSecOps and, compliance as code, continuous compliance and, GRC engineering and things like that is all part and parcel of the tool set that we can provide. But I think it's also a mindset as well. It is introducing that into the ecosystem. And David, you articulated that very well with looking at the controls, using that as the Rosetta Stone, as the codex that can, translate between representative frameworks. Has been a challenge. We help in that space. We provide the mapping. Or Tony, your son, the lead cartographer, as you mentioned, mapping those out for us as well. Is again, it's not only generational, but I think it does inspire those to be better. Does that make sense, Tony?
Well, I think yeah. Well, I was having a discussion with the other day, and with the greatest respect to the, there's no bigger fan of hardened images than me. Well, maybe Sean, but because people don't appreciate, right? They tend to dismiss it. I was in this discussion. Well, that's great stuff, David. But that's just cyber hygiene. Right? That's just like washing your hands. It's no big deal, right? I got to worry about the nation states and those rascally, So I need to buy some exotic $1 million tool. I need some fancy threat feed. No, you don't. If you don't have a foundation of defense, you can't manage whatever, you might get the most exotic, nuanced, subtle, what are these bad people in this country trying to do to me? That's great. It's fascinating to know, but if you can't action it, if you can't say, well, what would be the impact on well-configured hardened images that are the basis for my system? It's just esoteric, stuff to you. So that was the discussion I had with someone was reminding them the absolute bedrock foundation of every successful security program is configuration management. And the quicker you get there, the better you are. And for most people, that is actually a great place to be, right? It's so far advanced where they are. And for sort of typical enterprises, that's great. Now, there are high-risk companies in high-risk situations willing to spend a ton more. They still need the foundation because, again, they may learn some information, but if they can't find in their enterprise where it's relevant, if they can't quickly understand to say, hey, my systems are already configured against that, I don't need to panic, right? It's interesting. All that is essentially based upon the foundation that you guys have described. So, I'm always been a huge fan of that. And again, people want to dismiss it, but you can dismiss it at your peril because you need it anyway.
I have a fun story about that in terms of foundational security. It's not even cybersecurity; it's physical security. I was banking at my local bank, and most banks that you go to now, it's just tellers, right? But this bank is old school, and they have a monumental vault door. Gigantic, the old school vault door.
Yeah, I love to see that. They spin the thing.
You don't see that very often.
Great.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the vault door was wide open, right? And people are going back and forth, and they have to use a key to get past like the actual gate. But the vault itself is open. And I asked one of the tellers, I'm like, why isn't the vault door closed? She goes, it takes like a half hour to open the vault door. So we open it in the morning and we close it at night. Okay, that's one way to do it.
Yeah, I love it. I love that. Yeah. Well, I have a saying, David, you'll appreciate. I said, if you make security too expensive or onerous, your users become your attackers. Right. You're in the way of my operational flow here. If it takes me 30 minutes, and I think in this group, we're all old enough to remember when Dropbox became a verb and thumb drive became a verb, right? When the policy guy, nothing personal, Sean, says you're not allowed to bring this in or out, right? And well, people are not evil. They believe they have a job to do. So they thumb drive around your defenses. They Dropbox past your defenses because they believe that their job requirement sort of outweighs that fussy security guy over in the corner. And so for the security folks, you have to, your choice is, am I better off providing them a mechanism for this operational need that I can live with, that I can monitor, that control, or should I stand on the street corner yelling at everybody, telling them what they're doing wrong, and and lamenting, oh my, get off my lawn, so forth. So we've made a choice. I mean, I did years ago, and I know we're all in the same choice, right? We're going to help people get their job done in a responsible way, to the best that we can, recognizing there is no perfect solution here. There's no perfect hardened image, right? It represents great value. But at the end of the day, people need to communicate. They need to move data around. They need to interact with supply chain partners. And we have to, again, think of this. And that, that's, we go from the level of benchmarks, controls, component level things up to the, say, operational management of the controls. How do I organize my defense? How do I operate it in a responsible way? And all that has to fit together, and I think if you don't, right, if you're only doing sort of one of those, you miss that opportunity to create a combined picture. But back to I'm the fanboy of security configuration guidance. Once I saw that, back in my early days at the Ford, I said, "Oh my gosh, why aren't we doing this? Why isn't everybody doing this? Why are we leaving 18-year-old tech school graduates on their own with Stone Age tools to try and do it by themselves?" This is. I remember one more story, because there was a big hack against a DoD activity, and I'm talking to, I think, 1 or 2 star Army person. He goes, we need to find the person that failed to put in place the patch, or the configuration change that left us at risk. And I said, and we need to make an example of this person. I said, sir, nothing personal, but any enterprise that puts their entire fate in the hands of a 19-year-old tech school graduate, right? Your lowest paid, least equipped, that's not a bad person. That's bad strategy. That's shame on us. We've made it hard. And if that same person had come to you and said, sir, we need to take the mail server down for a few hours so we can put in place all the patches from the last month or whatever, what would you have said? You'd have probably said, oh my gosh, mission critical. You can't do that. So you're going to give them conflicting requirements in an impossible situation, and you're going to blame them for the fall. That's on us. That's not on these people. We have good Americans running those networks. That's not the issue. The issue is we have planned badly, right? We haven't given them the tools like a hardened image to get them to a level without all the artwork and the craftsmanship that most of them just aren't prepared for. So it's been a great ride to watch the history of this kind of stuff and to see the kind of work that you guys are doing. Right, this is like grown up, mature. We know how to use this. We know how to create them. We know how to deliver them. We know how integrate them into real environments, right, to solve real problems. And I think that's. I mean, we're so far ahead of where we were just not that many years ago. So.
Yeah, agreed. Mishal, the last word on this is we've talked about all the great things that we're doing now. So anybody looking to strengthen their security foundation, what resources or first steps are you going to recommend so they can get started with the hardened baselines?
That's a great question. So what I would say is, other than our website, right? If you look at our hyperscalers and our partners, a lot of people don't realize this, but they may be coherently using CIS already, even if they're not. So on Azure, and I'm going to keep this agnostic since we represent AWS and GCP as well. So on Azure, if you're using Defender, if you're using Purview, if you're using Intune, right? CIS Benchmarks play a role there, right? And with that being said, same thing along the lines of AWS. Security Hub and Inspector has our benchmarks. And one of the best advice I could say is start playing with it. I'm a person that strongly believes in not just reading the textbook, but going ahead and applying it in real life. The way that it's set up on the marketplace is anybody with a valid account and a credit card can go up and spin an image. They can play around with the settings. They can go ahead and learn on the fly. And of course, leverage some of our partners. If you feel like you want to go even deeper, you can take a SANS course. You can take any level of training to understand not just the nuances of security, but also about CIS. And I wanted to touch a little bit on what Tony said, because it was really important. If your configuration governance is solid, right, automation accelerates the excellence. If it's brittle, automation just spreads risk faster. So it's a very important line to kind of understand. And I would say, go to our website, email us, or just go directly to our hyperscalers.
Well, thank you, Mishal, David. Great episode. A lot of information. Really appreciate you participating and being on the show. And of course, Tony, thank you, sir. It's always great to get to talk to you and talk to the CIS staff as well. Fantastic.
Right back to you, Sean.
Wonderful. And to our audience, thank you as well. Questions, comments, concerns, podcast@cisecurity.org. Catch us on YouTube at the CI Security. Remember to subscribe in all the usual ways on your preferred podcast provider to catch us every Wednesday for episodes like this and much, much more. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the podcast today.
The thoughts and opinions expressed by our podcast guests are solely theirs and do not necessarily reflect those of CIS.
Tune in on Wednesdays for a new episode. And in the meantime, visit our website at cisecurity.org.
Together, we'll continue our efforts of creating confidence in the connected world.